Good morning. Today we continue our year-long Democracy 2018 interviews with the candidates for Michigan governor. This morning we shine our spotlight on two Democrats who have never held elected office before. Medical doctor Abdul El-Sayed, former director of the Detroit Health Department, and PhD scientist Sri Tanadar, a self-made entrepreneur. We begin in alphabetical order with Dr. El-Sayed. It's Sunday, April the 22nd, and this is Spotlight. Doctor, thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. All right, let me ask you what I imagine you get a lot on the campaign trail. Why is it in a state that has gone from blue to red, elected President Trump, that you're optimistic that someone with the name Abdul will be elected the next governor of this state?
You know, I'll tell you, there's a beautiful thing about this state, and that Michiganders are just good people. They're not as interested in what your name is, how you pray. They're a lot more interested in if you've taken the time to listen about their challenges and what you can do to solve them. I've been all over the state now, and my family itself, it represents different parts of the state. My father was an immigrant from Alexandria, Egypt. My stepmom, Jackie, born and raised in Gratiot County, Michigan, 6th generation Michigander. And so I've known different parts of Michigan throughout my upbringing, and I've been all over the state. And wherever I go, people are less interested in what my name is rather than if I've taken the time to listen and if I'm proposing what it is that we can do to solve problems. And here's the thing, people sometimes don't really care how you pray as a Muslim, they care what you pray for.
So what do you make over this debate over immigration, refugees, and is this indeed the best way to grow this state, to grow this city, to grow this country?
Well, I'll tell you, I've never met an immigrant in my life who didn't value the same things that all of us value. That's having a great life in a great place and a great opportunity for their kids. And so when they come here, my dad came here in 1978 believing that this was the place that he could build out his dreams, and by all means we got that. And so in this state of ours, we've got to make this a welcoming place for everybody. Anybody who wants to come here, bring their ideas, their industriousness, bring a focus on doing great work and empowering our communities, they belong. And right now what we're seeing out of the Trump administration is a focus on trying to demonize certain kinds of Americans. And I'm just not about that. I think we are a country who's always believed in the ideal, e pluribus unum, that out of many, there can be one. And at this point, we have to decide whether or not our policies are true to form on that. So for me, I want to make Michigan a welcoming state where anybody and everybody can come here from any part of the world to be able to build that life for themselves and contribute to our community. I was up north in Leelanau, and a gentleman named John, whose family has been in the dairy business for generations, sat me down and said, Abdul, listen, if Donald Trump gets away with his kind of menacing of immigrants in this state, it's going to ruin our agricultural industry. And people don't know this, but agriculture is the second biggest industry in Michigan.
Yes, it is.
That means standing up for our economy, standing up for our families, and standing up for the state of Michigan.
Are you convinced that if someone votes for you, that somewhere down the line on this marathon campaign trail, that their vote won't be a wasted vote, that your eligibility will hold up all the way through? So far, it looks like you're okay based upon the most recent decision from the Secretary of State's office, but there's nothing that says down the line that the Republican Party or someone else can stand up and challenge you.
I was the first candidate to turn in my 24,000 ballot petition signatures that were collected by volunteers. And we know that there are people all over the state who want to see this candidacy flourish. There's been a push by insiders who are threatened by the way that I'm running my campaign, speaking truth to power, not taking corporate money, who are standing up and saying, well, there are questions about his eligibility. And here's the thing, there are no different questions about my eligibility than anybody else's. There was a decision made by the Secretary of State and the Attorney General's office. They basically said that any controversy about my eligibility is simply manufactured controversy by the media and the Democratic Party. For far too long, Chuck, we've given our politics over to the rich who can run Super Bowl ads, or to corporations who are buying and selling politicians, and then we wonder why our policies aren't where we want them to be. There's a responsibility for us to take back that politics. This campaign is doing it, and you can imagine that a lot of the folks who benefit from the status quo don't like it, and so they'll find any way forward when they know they can't beat you at the ballot box to try and cut you off at the knees.
We are going to give you a little breather here. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll hurry right back with more questions. Stay with us. Are you being out-commercialized in this campaign? There's another Democrat in this race, and he's running commercials like nobody's business, and he is billing himself as the most progressive Democrat in this race. True or false?
Look, you can call yourself whatever you want. You could pay millions of dollars to put that on TV. It doesn't change the facts, right? I've been a Democrat my whole life. My values I have shown in the work that I decided to do. When I graduated from medical school, instead of going out and being a part of the medical industry, instead I realized that for me, what brought me to medicine was a focus on people and policies that would address racial and ethnic and social inequalities in health. And we know that there are huge chasms in the kinds of lives that people get to lead. And so my work speaks for itself. Now, I can go out and say I'm an NBA basketball player. I'm 5'8", that's not happening for me. Other people can go out and say I'm the most progressive candidate. But when they made a decision to be Democrats 2 weeks before they decided to run and have nothing to show for their work in public service, it rings kind of hollow. And I think people in Michigan are smart enough to see the difference. Now, look, I'm not a rich man. I made decisions in my life that said that service was always more important to me than making money and then being able to turn that money into political power. For me, it's about how do we build a grassroots campaign around the politics that we want to see in our Michigan. And we know that right now, too many people are suffering because we've seen people like Rick Snyder who did exactly the same thing, turned a lot of money into a lot of power and then made decisions that ended up poisoning people in places like Flint, Kent County, and generally run government the wrong way.
Doctor, you worked for Detroit Mayor Michael Duggan for a little over a year. You headed up the health department. He does not endorse you. He's thrown his endorsement to Gretchen Whitmer, one of your opponents. What should that suggest to the viewers that the man that you worked for won't turn around and endorse you?
Yeah, well, his values are not my values, and I realized that while I was working at the health department.
Were his values your values when you signed on to work for him?
It became pretty clear that we valued different things. My job was to be able to build a public health department that had been shut down after emergency management. And in the work that I was doing, whether it was making sure our kids had access to free glasses at school, 7,000 kids who now have glasses that didn't have them before, standing up to some of the biggest corporate polluters in the state, making sure that our kids weren't exposed to lead in their schools. Every single time I wanted to move on something that could have been politically tenuous, I found the mayor's door closed, whether it was 17,000 water shutoffs that he continues to perpetrate on the people of the city of Detroit, whether it's the fact that his demolitions program, because of the dust that's created, is exposing kids to lead.
You said
These
the mayor
are issues
was,
that we took him on. And
you said the mayor was poisoning the people.
Yeah, I mean,
you stand by that statement?
I did an analysis on the demolitions and what was happening to kids because of them. And what we found was that in the summer months, there was a clear link between whether or not a demolition happened within 400 feet of a child and where they lived and the likelihood of that child being poisoned with lead. We then put together a task force, 18 recommendations, experts in both demolition and health, 18 recommendations about how to make those safe. For an entire summer, only 8 out of those 18 recommendations were followed. Those are the facts. And so there's been an announcement that they're going to put a moratorium on demolitions in some of the zip codes, but not all of them. And the evidence suggests that the demolitions are causing lead poisoning in all of the zip codes. And so to me, willingly moving forward on a program that we know is linked to lead poisoning, that the facts speak for themselves. And this is the facts of it. I am running a campaign that is focused on people and putting people first. And the mayor's reelection campaign, he had more donations from employees of Blue Cross Blue Shield than he had in donations from Detroiters themselves.
All right.
Those aren't my values.
Doctor, would it be safe to say from a political standpoint, there's bad political blood between you and Mayor Duggan?
I don't think it's about politics. To me, this is about what we do in public service.
Take the politics out of it. Is there just bad blood between you and the mayor?
I think there are disagreements about how the world should work.
To
me, a vision for Detroit that matters is a vision that includes all 138 square miles, not just the 8 square miles between downtown and midtown. I'm not interested in selling the city to folks like Dan Gilbert. I'm interested in making sure that the people who've been there all along have a shot at a great, dignified life. I don't think that the mayor sees it that way.
So here becomes a question for the voters. Voters have to say, okay, if I help you get elected and you become the next governor of this state, you're going to have to work with the mayor of the largest city in this state. Right. And we know that they don't get along in a very quote unquote democratic city. Traditionally, it's been a democratic city. That doesn't bode well, one, for turning out a Democratic vote in Detroit and Wayne County, and it also says that there's going to probably be a rocky relationship between the two of you that may not be good for this state.
Well, I'll tell you, I think the mayor and I can find common ground on what we agree upon. We've disagreed in the past, but I also know that a lot of people disagree with the direction that the city is going, particularly people who live in the city. And so, you know, you look at the vote count, you had 72% of a 12 or 17% turnout vote, gives you about 12% of the vote. And so there's still not a huge turnout because people in Detroit are not excited about a vision that has been put forward by any of the politicians who've been running. My hope is that when the mayor and I meet, when I'm governor, on footing that says what can we do together to build out opportunities for people, to stop the water shutoffs, to make sure that they have health care, to make sure that the jobs that we're building don't just go to folks from outside of the city, but are going to folks inside the city. How do we build mass transportation that's not just 3.3 miles of Woodward, but includes the entire city? How do we make sure that we're bringing down the cost of auto insurance? We'll find things to work on. We'll get them done.
Well, if that got your attention, trust me, there's a whole lot more. I'll continue my lengthy conversation with Dr. El Sayed on our website. On your computer or mobile device, go to our WXYZ.com homepage to hear a lot more about what he wants to do for the state of Michigan. Coming up here on air, Dr. Sri Tanadar. We'll be right back. Thank you for coming in. Let's start. We have been bombarded with television commercials.
Yes.
Sri for we, and you're just like me. Your critics would say that you are trying to buy name recognition, and some have even suggested you're trying to buy the governorship. Your reaction?
Well, you know, I have run small businesses. I'm an entrepreneur. And last 26 years, I have run many small companies, created jobs. I am not a career politician. Well, I wanted to communicate who I am, because when you are choosing the leader of our state, it's important not only to see what the issues and positions the person has and what he or she wants to do, but it's more important to know who this person is, because we're going to trust the entire state's future in the hands of our leader. And to do that, I think it's just as important what kind of life I have lived, how I have dealt with difficulties in my life, and what have I accomplished.
We're in April, middle of April. Safe to say you've spent over $1 million on advertisements so far?
That's correct. I think all of the candidates have spent over $2 million. All three of us have. I have put my own hard-earned money. Some of the other candidates have done a lot of fundraising, gotten money from state, and one candidate has gotten more than half of his money outside of the state.
All right. You've got enough to spend all the way to the end if you make it past August?
Yes, I do.
All right. Another key part of your advertisement is about immigration.
Yes.
And you admit that you have an accent, and that's just very similar to many other people in the state of Michigan. Why do you believe that's going to be an asset and not a handicap in a state that has gone from blue to red, and many people say has become increasingly conservative and not so welcoming of immigration, refugees, and all that in between?
Well, I immigrated to United States 40 years ago.
From India?
From India. That's where I was born. And I came here, they say $20 in my pocket. Actually, I had 16 because I had a couple beers on the plane.
Okay.
And then I got a PhD in chemistry. And I came to Michigan first time in 1982. I got a job as a scientist at the University of Michigan. Worked in Michigan for 2 years at the University of Michigan, and then got a job out of the state. And so I went to St. Louis, Missouri, where I worked as a chemist. And in 1990, I bought a small business, a 3-person chemical analysis and testing service business. And when I bought the business, I bought it for $75,000. I got a loan from a bank. I had $3,000 on my credit card. I used that as my working capital, and I started that business and grew it from $150,000 revenue a year to $65 million revenue. In 2008, I created about 450 jobs, all the jobs created here in America, not a single job outsourced. I grew up in dire poverty. My father retired when I was 14 years old. He had no pension, 4 girls, 2 boys, and my mother raised us in dire poverty. And my mother is my hero. And my mother, I learned from her how to stand up, how to never give up, you know, no matter how hard things get. Talk will only get us so far. Ultimately, we need to make a difference in people's lives.
All right, we need to take a little break. When we come back, I want to talk about if you get a chance to go to Lansing and become the top elected official of the state, how you would govern. We'll be right back with Sri Thanedar, Democrat, candidate for Michigan governor. Stay with us. And welcome back to Spotlight. Mr. Thanedar, you have never been elected to a public office before. Why start at the top, and why should people trust that you would be prepared to do that job? Just because you've been successful in business does not necessarily mean you'd be successful in government. And a lot of people look at the current governor and say, whoa, look what that got us. It got us a Flint and other things. May not be justified, but that's certainly some of the accusations they've made.
Well, governor is a leader. A governor sets the tone for the entire state.
But the governor also has to work with the legislature and a whole lot of other politicians and has to know how the governmental system works.
Look, running the government is not rocket science. Finding win-win solutions is what matters. You know, otherwise it's just talk. Now, as a governor, I would set the tone, I will have a vision, and I will provide a very strong leadership. Now, Rick Snyder did not have the strong backbone to fight with the conservative right-wing lawmakers. He caved in to the lawmakers. He came in with a sense of an arrogance, as if the lawmakers are his employees. And you know, I am not that kind of a person. I'm very humble. I am very open. I listen to different viewpoints. You know, I have a thick skin, so I don't have to wake up at 3 a.m. to tweet. And I'll work with all sides. So every stakeholder will be at my table, and we will hammer out the best solutions. As far as getting things done through the legislature, my lieutenant governor, he or she would have experience in the House and experience in the Senate. I would have a chief of staff that would have experience served in the House and Senate.
Some of your opponents just on the Democratic side say you're just another rich cat running for a political office. You've had success, you've had failure as an entrepreneur. One of your companies even went into receivership, and Bank of America had to buy it back. Why should the people trust that you would not end up doing the same thing to this state, which right now has more than $1 million sitting in its rainy day funds, and people certainly don't want to go back to the times of 2008 when this state was in really bad shape?
Absolutely. And you know, I am battle tested. I grew up in poverty. I know how 22% of Michiganders live below poverty line, how 40% of African American children live in poverty. I have been in their shoes. I am the only gubernatorial candidate that knows what it feels like going to bed hungry. You know, I have slept in public buildings. I have slept in my car when I couldn't afford an apartment. So I have an understanding about people and how they live, and I have the compassion. We haven't seen much compassion. We haven't seen much love in Lansing for the last 7 years. In the recession, when my business suffered because many of my customers went belly up in the recession, and that hurt my revenue. But unlike Donald Trump, I never declared bankruptcy. I paid the bank in full. when the recession hit me. And I bounced back. After losing my business in 2010, I came to Ann Arbor, Michigan, restarted my business, created 50 good paying jobs in 6 years, and created value. And when I sold my business in 2016, I took a chunk of the profits and distributed that to all of my 50 employees. And the way I did it is not based on their title, because often the president and the CFO get most of the money. I gave the money to my employees based on their length of service.
What would your top priority be if elected governor by the people?
My top priority would be certainly fixing our infrastructure. The roads, the potholes has been dangerous. People spend so much money fixing their cars. The entire Michiganders spend about $2.5 billion fixing their cars. So I want to make sure the roads are fixed the right way. The bridges, waterways, we have lead pipes all over that have poisoned kids and adults. We've seen what happened in Flint.
Everybody wants it fixed. How are you going to pay for it? That's where the rubber hits the road, so to speak, no pun intended.
No, we have, there's a way to fix it. One, we need to get our share of federal funds. So for example, expansion of 94 or getting a new SULOC, money will come from federal government. I want to watch the money that's been given to corporations. We're giving away millions and billions of dollars to corporations. I want to cut some of that because many of that hasn't helped in creating jobs in Michigan. I want to do a graduated tax structure that will raise about $1.8 billion. We will do municipal bonds, 30-year municipal bonds. I would, after the ballot proposal passes for recreational marijuana, that will generate about $125 million worth of revenue. So money would be there.
All right, you support that, marijuana?
I absolutely support that.
Right.
Not only I support that, but I want to expunge records so people can get back in the society, become productive, and their past prison sentences for non-violent offenders doesn't become a hindrance for them to get a new job. So I'll eliminate that box where people ask the question, and I will make sure the record is expunged so that they can become part of the society again. And I will give skill sets to the returning citizens so that they don't have to end up going back in the prison.
Like the Democrat before him, now go to WXYZ.com to hear and see my entire interview with Dr. Tandadar. We thank both candidates for spending time with us today. I'm Chuck Stokes. We'll be back next week with more newsmakers in the spotlight. We hope you have a great week.